الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل بدعة ضلالة ثم أما بعد أيها الأحبة الكرام السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, today I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about al-mahr, the dowry, and the walima of the marriage. And we'll start first with al-mahr. طيب, al-mahr, this is the right, one of the rights of the bride or the wife. It is the mal or the money or the amount of wealth or property paid to the bride by the groom, and it has many names in the Arabic language. It's called al-mahr. This is one of the names, and also it's called as-sadaq. وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدَقَاتُهِنَّ نِحْلَةً. And also it's called al-nihla, which means the gift. Also al-ajr. فَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ. It's like reward or payment. And also called al-farida. فَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ فَرِيضَةً. وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِيمَا تَرَاضَيْتُمْ بِهِ بَعْدَ الْفَرِيضَةِ. Farida, also one of the names of al-mahr. Farida can be translated as prescribed. So those are all the names of al-mahr, which is the absolute right of the wife. And the man must definitely pay the mahr to the woman and should not resent it. Okay? Because it's a gift, and she should give it with showing pleasure, not to show displeasure for giving it. And as I said, it is the absolute right of the woman. No one has the permission to take any part of the mahr from the woman without her permission or approval. The father or anyone is not allowed to take anything from that mahr, because it is her and it is her right. Now, it is highly recommended to mention or name the mahr at the time of the contract in front of the witnesses to eliminate any possibility of disputes in the future. But al-mahr, or mentioning the mahr, is not a condition for the validity of the marriage contract. In other words, the marriage contract is considered to be valid even without mentioning the amount of mahr. But the woman is entitled to get the mahr, even if it is not mentioned at the time of the contract. Again, mentioning or naming the mahr at the time of the contract is not a prerequisite for the validity of the mahr. طيب. As I said, no one is entitled to get any part of the mahr without the approval or the permission of the wife. But if she forgoes the mahr or any part of it willingly, voluntarily, then the husband can take it. فَإِن طِبْنَ لَكُمْ عَنْ شَيْءٍ مِّنْهُ نَفْسًا فَكُلُوهُ هَنِيئًا مَرِيئًا. So if she forgoes part of the mahr and give it to the husband, of course the husband can take it, and there is nothing wrong with that. But it has to be done voluntarily from her side. طيب. There is no cap for the minimum or the maximum of the mahr, and it could be anything that has a value and it can be owned. Anything that has a value and can be owned, legally owned in Islam, can be a mahr, and there is no cap. But it is highly recommended for women not to ask for high mahr. يقول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أكثرهن أعظم النساء بركة أيسرهن مؤونة. The most blessed women are the ones with the less expenditure. يعني if she asks for less mahr, that would be more blessing for her. But of course, it is her absolute right. And there is no minimum, and also there is no maximum. وَإِنْ آتَيْتُمْ إِحْدَاهُنَّ قِنْطَارًا, like 100 pounds of gold, worth of gold. This was mentioned in the Quran. So there is no minimum and there is no maximum, but it's preferred for the mahar not to be high. And as I said, also anything that can be a price can be also mahar. In other words, anything that has a value and can be owned, then can be a price. It could be a property, jewelry, money, anything of that, or it could be, for example, teaching her skills or teaching her Quran. Yani a mahar can be only teaching the wife like a surah. It was mentioned that a man came to the Prophet ﷺ and he asked him, التمس ولو خاتما من حديد. يعني try to find even a ring made of steel or iron. This is very cheap. And also he says at the end, when they say the companion said, I don't have anything, قال زوجتكها بما معك من القرآن. In other versions, that I will marry this woman to you, and the mahar would be to teach her some of the Quran. Okay, or part of the Quran, or some ayat of the Quran. This could be a mahar if, of course, it's agreed upon by the two parties of the contract. So it does not have to be something tangible, yani like a property or money or wealth. It could be anything that had a value. Okay, teaching her any type of skills. It is also, it is not obligatory to give the whole mahar at the time of the contract. You know, according to the agreement, if they agree to defer part of the mahar to a later date, or to defer the whole mahar to the later date, that will be acceptable. But as Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah said, it is preferred to give the mahar right away, not to defer it. It's preferred. But of course, if she agreed to receive part of the payment of the mahar at the time of the contract, and then the other part deferred to a later time, that will be acceptable as long as she agreed to that. And it's preferred, of course, to mention the date for the deferred mahar. Like, for example, I will pay you part of the mahar, half of the mahar, for example, now, and the other half in a month from now, or a year from now. It's preferred to mention the date, but it is not an obligation. He can say, I will give you part of the mahar now, and the rest later on. And the rest later on. Upon separation, and by separation we mean either by death of one of the two spouses or divorce, then we're going to study to mention some scenarios. If they have the contract and he divorced her before the consummation of the marriage. Okay, they did the contract, but they did not consummate the marriage yet. And by consummation of the marriage, which is called ad-dukhul, that he has the opportunity to be with her in privacy, even without having intimacy or sexual intercourse. And there is nothing to prevent him from having intimacy or intercourse. This is called dukhul. So if he divorced her before ad-dukhul, before that, then we have two scenarios. If they already mentioned the amount of the mahar, then she is entitled to one half of that mahar. Example, if the mahar is $1,000 and he divorced her before the consummation of marriage, she is entitled to one half of that, which is $500. إلا أن يعفون أو يعفو الذي بيده عقدة النكاح. Unless if the husband say, okay, no problem, you can keep the whole mahar. Or if she said no, you can keep your mahar. But she is entitled, it is her right to get one half of that mahar. If the mahar is mentioned or named at the time of the contract and he divorced her before consummation of the marriage. If the divorce is before the consummation of the marriage, but they do not mention any mahar, then she is entitled to al-mut'ah. Al-mut'ah is a gift, a kind of gift that should be presented by the husband to the divorced wife. Now, if the divorce took place after the consummation of marriage and the mahar was mu'ajjal, which is deferred, she is entitled to get it right away. Or if part of it is deferred, she's entitled to get it right away. And she's entitled to get, in fact, the entire mahar, the whole mahar. This is if marriage is consummated. Also, upon separation by death, if one of the two spouses dies, for example, if he dies, then she's entitled to get the entire mahar, whether they consummated the marriage or not. So if the separation is by death, she's entitled to the whole mahar, whether they consummated the marriage or not. Now, if she dies, then her heirs are entitled to get the mahar, the full mahar. So upon death, whether he or she dies, then the mahar has to be given. Okay? طيب. This is in the case of separation. طيب. Now, if he did not give the mahar to the woman, say for example, if they agreed for the mahar, and he did not give her the mahar, then she has the right to deny him from any type of intimacy. And also she can refuse to move to his home until she get the mahar. Now, if say the mahar is a deferred payment, they agreed to defer the mahar to a later time, say a month or 2 months after the contract. Of course, in this case, she should not deny him sexual intercourse, and she should move to his place. But if after 2 months he did not pay the mahar, then still she has the right to deny him from any type of intimacy. And also, if he refused, or if he is broken and he cannot pay the mahar, she has the right to ask to annul the contract. Okay, this is her right. If she wants to pursue that, she can do that. Okay, she can ask for fasakh or to annul the contract. Right. One more thing, if they did not mention or named any mahar at the time of the contract, like he said, the wali said, I married my daughter to you, and he said, I accepted that, and he did not mention or negotiate any mahar, then she deserves, or she is entitled to the mahar of al-mithil, a similar woman like her. We should look in the community, women in her social status, in her beauty, in her, like a family like her family, and we see the average mahar paid to such women, then she is entitled to get that mahar. But it's all the time preferred to mention the mahar at the time of the contract, or at least in front of the two witnesses of the marriage contract, to eliminate any possibility of future disputes among the two about the amount of the mahar. Now, the second part, which is about al-walima, it is a sunnah. It's recommended to make a walima and to invite people to that walima. If the person can afford to make a walima, then it's preferred to slaughter at least a shah, a goat or a lamb. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لعبد الرحمن بن عوف أولم ولو بشاه, يعني make a walima even with one shah. This is considered to be the minimum, but at the same time, we should not go into israf, like some people, they exceed the limits, okay, just for show off. This is of course prohibited. People should be reasonable in that. Yes, you want to celebrate and you want to invite your friends and your family members, your Muslim brothers, but we should not exceed the limits. So if he can afford to at least slaughter a shah, then he should do that. If he cannot afford to do that, then he can invite any people and he can present to them anything. It does not have to be meat. But as in general, it is recommended to have the walima of the marriage contract. Now, if you are invited to a walima, then you are obliged, or it's an obligation upon you, to respond to that walima, with some exceptions. The only you are not required to respond if there is some of evil acts will be committed in that walima or in that gathering. If there is any type of prohibitions would be committed in the walima or the celebration, then you should not respond. Like, for example, if they're going to play music and have men and women mixing and dancing and things like that, of course you should not go to that walima. But otherwise you must respond to the walima. If he invited you personally, if he mentioned you by name, then you have to. But if he made a general invitation, like he stood after the salah and he said, everyone is invited to my walima, then of course you are recommended to respond, but it's not an obligation. But if he mentioned you or invited you by name, then you have to respond, unless there is a legitimate excuse for you not to respond. Okay. And as I said, if there is any type of haram things practiced in that walima, you should not respond. But when you refuse to go, do you have to mention to him the reason? If, for example, he invited you and you know for sure they invited a band to play music and things like that during the walima, of course you should not go. But should you inform him about the reason? The scholar said yes, for many reasons. First of all, maybe he was ignorant and he does not know that this act is haram, and by doing this then you will inform him that it is a haram and you should not do that, and I'm not coming for that reason, and also to show your excuse. Now, those are some of the related issues to the walima. One more issue: if you are fasting and you are invited to the walima. Now, if that fasting is an obligatory fasting, like someone who has a nadhr, or he making up some days who missed in Ramadan, okay, and he's making up those days, and he was invited to the walima, then he must respond, but he should continue fasting. He would respond and pray for him. يدعو له, he supplicate for him. If it's a voluntary fasting, then we should look. If you think, of course you have to respond and come, but should you eat and break your fast? Now, if you think by eating and breaking your fast, this will bring more pleasure to him, of course you are recommended to do that. But if you think that what he cares about, you're coming to the walima, okay, then it would be preferred to continue fasting. But at the end, it's a voluntary fasting, and the Prophet ﷺ says, "As-sa'im al-mutanaffil amiru nafsi." You are the amir of yourself. But if you think it would be more adequate to break your fast, to please him, then you would be rewarded for that. But if you think, just by coming and making dua for him, that should be enough and pleasing for him, then it would be preferred to continue your fasting. Inshallah, I'm going to conclude right here, and if you have inshallah any questions or any comment, you can inshallah go ahead and add. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, wa sallallahu wa sallim wa barik ala Muhammad.